There's a motion at the desk.
Pursuant to Article 4, Section 19 of the Constitution of the State of Minnesota, NISCA moves that the rule therein be suspended and an urgency be declared that the rules of the House be so far suspended so that House Law Number 14 be given its second and third readings and be placed upon its final passage.
I recognize Representative Niska to explain the motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is the transportation bill. This had policy side-by-sides and spreadsheets posted on May 29th. There was this updated spreadsheet on June 4th, and then draft language posted on June 5th, and then updated on June 6th. The only change from that updated language that was posted on June 6th was a change to the allocation of the Metro sales tax that was very widely covered and discussed over the weekend. And so that is the bill that we have before us today. I urge members to support the motion.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too urge members' support.
All in favor, aye. Any opposed, say nay. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill its second reading.
Second reading, House Law Number 14.
Second reading. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 14, an act relating to transportation, establishing a budget for transportation.
I recognize the member from Anoka, the author, Representative Cagle, who will explain the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to get this kind of off my chest here a little bit first. This bill is the result of a broken deal. All of the leaders signed the spreadsheets and the policy provisions and then went back on their word. So I just want to put that out there that I'm really disappointed in that. And so what this bill does is it actually, we are able to take all of the governor's recs as far as the increases in operating adjustments. We also are able to get $10 million to the Duluth Airport. There's a cut to Greater Minnesota Transit of $22 million in this next biennium, but luckily we were able to stave off the permanent cuts that the other folks were looking for. We were also able to get some money to some program or some trunk highway funding. There are 4 named projects, and so that there's a $40 million earmark for Lakeville. I was really proud to get the $2.7 million in for Crookston because that was a program that I worked on, and it went through the Empowering Small Communities Fund that we were able to also fund in this bill. I will have to say that one of my biggest disappointments, though, is that we are balancing the transportation budget on the backs of transit riders, and that's what that broken promise did. Is it really shifted a lot of our cuts to transit riders, and so that's really disappointing. Another point where we're not protecting our vulnerable people, our people that can't drive, our people that are unable to drive, and missing a huge opportunity to do the build out of our bus rapid transit system, as well as $400 million in regional bonds to actually build that system out. So very disappointed that that deal was broken, that we weren't able to get that through. But other than that, this bill funds state government. We were able to make sure to protect our greenhouse gas mitigation bill that was passed in 2024, and so there's no change to current law on the greenhouse gas mitigation. And so, and then the EV fees. We also did do a change to our EV fees, and this is based off of MSRP of the vehicle, and there'll be a low rate. And then we also were able to get a working group together that would study the kilowatt hour charging. That might be the way of the future. And so with that, we were also able to get some funding to the Washington County Bridge. I know that was very important to a lot of folks. So with that, I think I will just leave it at questions. Again, I'm really disappointed that the deal was broken. And you know, I think a lot of times that this stuff is done behind closed doors, because if people saw what happened behind closed doors, they'd actually be very appalled. And so, you know, I'm hoping that we can really work together here to make sure that in the future, we're not putting cuts on the backs of transit riders. And my vow is to transit riders that I will continue to work for you and work to get our transit system built out in the Twin Cities so that we can actually have convenient and quick transit here in the Twin Cities. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Hello, members. This transportation bill before us is a little bit different than the bill that left the House that we supported with over 60-some% of the vote. We got a little lost along the way. Took a little detour, and we got off track a little bit. But over the weekend, thanks to the voices of our county commissioners through all the 7 metro counties, we found our way back. And we were able to remove a taking of $93 million from county taxpayers, programs that our county commissioners use for transit and transportation services in the area. That kind of the last step of transportation that's very important. And I'm glad that our county commissioners, and I want to thank them so much for allowing us to correct that mistake. And so this bill is still very different from what left the House. And we've heard kind of a little theme about we're reducing, that things are kind of hard and it's not very comfortable. But let us be clear. We had a golden opportunity in 2023 with some $18 to $20 billion surplus, and we blew it. And now we're starting to face the reality that we can't spend at a rate higher than the revenues are coming in. And because we continue to spend on new programs, and we had to fight new programs coming into this bill, that would take more and more from our roads, bridges, and transit services, and now we have to make some decisions and make reductions where we see inefficiencies. We have to make reductions where we're not utilizing the resources of the state and put them where Minnesotans want us to, in the roads and bridges and the effective use of certain transit lines. And so that's the bill that was before us. We had a much stronger bill when we originally had the transportation bill in the House. It's always, we have a few provisions that a lot of our members in the committee, and I want to thank them for their work on some of those provisions for dealer plates and salvage titles. It's disappointing that some of the other provisions that we didn't get were dropped in the working group that was not the transportation chairs. And so, members, there's a few nice provisions in here that would have passed under either body being in a straight majority. And unfortunately, some of those other provisions that I think we missed an opportunity to have included, we'll continue to work on next year to make our roads and build our roads smarter with resilient pavement. And some of the other provisions that we had in there. We do continue to fund our transportation and transit systems quite healthily, including the Capitol Security is funded out of some of these accounts. Our state troopers are funded out of these accounts. We will be funding a couple academies that I think we can agree on. It is disappointing, however, when we're fighting for transportation dollars to maintain our roads, and we have $1 billion a year funding gap. I don't even know why we keep track of it anymore, because we apparently don't care. When the governor insists that almost $100 million gets spent for a building that I'm not sure we really need yet. House Republicans, House Democrats, Senates on both sides of the aisle said that theft of trunk highway funding was not necessary, but this governor wants to build himself a little building to memorialize himself. and he's getting it in this bill. Shame on the Commissioner of Transportation for not standing up for her mission to maintain our transportation system and just tell the governor to wait. But there are provisions in the bill that members worked hard on, and I want to commend our committee. I want to thank our staff again. I'm not going to name you this time, except for the marvelous Joe Marble. Thank you, Joe, because you always make me laugh when I start to get a little anxious. But I appreciate it, and I want to thank the nonpartisan stuff. We did that earlier when it came off the House floor, and it's been enjoyable to go through this process and see how it goes behind the scenes. And we will pass this bill, keeps Minnesota moving forward. It's unfortunate there were some provisions that were egregiously kind of tried to sneak in those back rooms that don't belong in that process. I'm proud that our county commissioners, again, as an example, stood up, had their constituents call, and were the voice of 3 million Minnesotans to rightfully use the dollars that were given to them in their own communities that strengthened the whole entire region. So thank you for stepping up over the weekend. There was a lot of phone calls, but that was the right thing to do. We as the legislature, the working group, the chairs made a mistake and put that in provision in there to take that money from the counties. But when you recognize a mistake, you own it. I do. And if you have time to correct it, that's what our job is to do. In the end, do the right thing. And so thank you to those that stood with me. I want to thank our partners over in the Senate. Sometimes we're not supposed to talk about them over here, but I want to thank Senator Dibble, Senator Jasinski, their staff, and the other senators that are working with us on this. And so Minnesota will continue to move forward. At the end, we're doing the work that Minnesotans expected us to do. We can debate a couple of the other provisions and stuff in the bill, and we'll have time to do more of a policy year next year. But we're moving forward, and that's what Minnesotans expect us to do, and I'm proud of the work that we did. So members, please vote your district, vote your conscience. Don't vote early, don't vote often, but just vote.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Niska moves to amend House Law number 14. The amendment is coded A2.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Niska, to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Well, Chair Cagle referenced some of the backroom deals that were happening, and this is one of the backroom deals that's still in the bill. Unfortunately, it's a provision, a mandate on Anoka County to spend a portion of its sales tax money on something that was never a bill that was presented to the legislature. It's a pet project for the co-chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and it's a pedestrian bridge across the Rum River Dam, mandating that Anoka County pay for it. Anoka County doesn't want this project. It's a proposed bridge would be a third crossing within less than a quarter of a mile on the Rum River, and the county has other needs that they think are not going to be served as a result of being forced to pay for this. It's not a priority that's on Anoka County's capital improvement list, and it's bad policy to have the county or to have the legislature start directing that the county spend money on it. Not only that, it tells the Department of Transportation to ignore other laws. In section 19 of the provision, it says, notwithstanding internal DOT guidelines, policies, or documents related to grant management, the commissioner must disperse the grant. This is only the beginning of a very, very large project for which there is no money. It is absolutely ridiculous that we are telling Anoka County that they have to begin spending money on a project, not to actually fund the project, begin spending money on a project that Anoka County does not want to spend its money on. I'm grateful that we were able to restore some of the money back to counties that the other backroom deal that was reversed has fixed, but we should fix this one as well. Members, please vote yes, and Madam Speaker, I request a roll call.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Stevenson.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I just want to correct the record on a few things that Leader Niska just said that are just not true, patently false. He said this was never a bill. It is an introduced bill. It received a hearing in the Transportation Committee. The transportation bill, as it passed off the House floor, included funding for this project. So, and I believe 67 Republicans voted for the transportation bill, which means that every member across the aisle has voted for this project as it came off the House floor. The only difference is the funding source, because we had a zero target coming off the House floor, and there was a cut target of $114 million in the global agreement. General fund dollars were not available. And so Leader Niska is correct that this is paid for out of the Anoka County's portion of the sales tax. But he also said it's unprecedented, and that is also not true. When the transportation bill passed off the House floor, it included a provision funding the Washington Avenue Bridge. That project was funded out of Hennepin County's share of the sales tax, and that is also included in this transportation bill. There's nothing about this that is as nefarious as he would indicate. This is a project that received vetting in a committee that was included on a House floor vote, and that was agreed to in a signed spreadsheet by leaders and held out in the public. So I would urge a no vote.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And what's really troubling are two things about this bill. When this bill left the floor the first time, it was general fund money. Now they're taking money from Anoka County that's supposed to be reserved for transit, is my understanding. And we just heard from Co-Chair Cagle how much she thought that the bill doesn't do enough for transit. So we're having a third footbridge within a quarter mile of the other two. And this language that talks about notwithstanding any other law or any other policy, I just want to read this to folks, that this must be dispersed, the grant under this section, directly to the city of Anoka, and may do so without complying with Minnesota laws and policies regarding management, including but not limited to requirement to have an agreement. Representative Stevenson, there's no law breaking in lawmaking. There's no law breaking in lawmaking. We have spent a lot of time this session focused on this grant making process and making sure people follow it. And right here we're telling them it doesn't matter. Break the rules, break the law. Just go ahead and pass this $6.2 million project that's going to, in the long run, cost $50 to $60 million. Would Representative Stevenson yield to a question?
Representative Stevenson will yield to a question. Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm sorry, Co-Chair Stevenson, no disrespect intended there. Where's the other $50 million going to come from for this project?
Representative Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Scott. First, I just want to correct the record. You talked about how this is law breaking. That's not true. To exempt the city from a grant management process when there's a competitive grant process makes perfect sense and happens in a number of projects throughout this bill and other bills. The protections you're talking about generally apply when you have a competitive grant process where multiple people are applying. This is a direct appropriation to a government unit, to the city of Anoka. It doesn't make sense. It is a waste of resources for the Department of Transportation for them to manage that grant as they would if it was a competitive grant process, which is probably why your co-chair on this side, on your side of the aisle, signed off on including that language, as they did for multiple other projects in the bill. I think it's disingenuous to highlight that and call it law breaking. It makes perfect sense. This project does not cost an additional $50 million. It costs an additional $30 million, and we will work on that over time. There are many projects throughout the legislature that we fund on a staged basis. That is a very common practice here. We're getting the ball moving. There's funding in the environment bill for this project as well that we just passed, that many of you voted for. So this is not uncommon. We do it all the time.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I didn't really hear a definitive answer on a project that clearly is not wanted by Anoka County, yet you're robbing their account, an account that's supposed to benefit the entire county, and they're supposed to be making the decisions, and you took that money out of there to fund a pet project. This is what people don't like about what we do down here. Members, vote yes on the Niska amendment.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm wondering if Representative Niska would yield to a question.
Representative Niska will yield to a question. Representative Howard.
Representative Niska, do you consider yourself a leader of your caucus?
Representative Niska.
Sure, yes.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'm grateful that you'll be voting no on this amendment. I have the leadership agreement. It says the legislative leaders will not support amendments to the above bills after the bills are finalized by agreement of the leaders below, except where an amendment is agreed upon by the leaders. This is not agreed. You're bringing this forward. So if you are a leader, I assume you'll do what leaders do and keep their word and vote no on this amendment. Or you can be a member from the peanut gallery and do this amendment and vote yes. That's your choice.
I recognize the member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
I see a little bit back and forth here, but to me, the first thing I hear, get the ball rolling, we'll find the money. How are we're finding difficulty funding stuff now. The next budget is multi-billion dollars, structurally deficit. So starting something that you don't have the money now to be able to pay for when you've got a huge deficit coming is not an intelligent thing for this body to do. Because frankly, a lot of the hard work we've done is to soften the impact of the coming deficit, get us in better situation, and it's foolish to throw a portion of funding at something that's going to be more funding needed when we're going to have less money available. The prudent, fiduciarily appropriate thing for this body to do is to accept the amendment. I hope you vote green.
Representative Niska.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Howard, for that cute point. I noticed you forgot to make that same point on the first amendment that we had today, in which DFL Floor Leader Long voted for an amendment, and you know that that's not what that language meant in that agreement. But members, this is a bad provision. It's a bad precedent to start telling counties that they need to do projects that they don't want to do. This project in particular is just the beginning of a very long, expensive project that county does not want to support. If Anoka wants that project, they can advocate for that project like they advocated for it in getting a direct appropriation in the original transportation bill, but not one where we're telling the county that they have to pay for it out of the portion that they would otherwise use for actual transportation needs in that county. Members, vote yes.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Olson. Olson.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 62 ayes and 67 nays, the motion does not prevail and the amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill a third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 14.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. I recognize the member from Beltrami, Representative Bliss.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to, first of all, thank the chair for bringing this bill back to sanity. But I do want to talk a little bit about the process on how we got here today and my disappointment in the process. We had an agreement signed by all the leaders. I'm not singling anybody out, including the gentleman downstairs, that we have very strict guidelines on what we can do today. They will not support any amendments. Let me get my old man glasses on here. The finalized bills will be conveyed to the House and Senate by June 9th and must be voted on and passed by the bodies no later than 7 a.m. on Tuesday. That gives us 21 hours to get through 14 bills. And then, the session will end in one legislative day. Again, for 21 hours and 14 bills. We didn't even have this transportation bill until it got, I believe the date on the bill is yesterday. There's still bills that were introduced today. At least that's what it looks like. And I know that if we question this, we're going to blow up the whole deal, and we don't want to do that. And members, we've got some good things on these bills that we passed today, so I chose not to. But I do want to talk just a little bit about this. I mean, what would hurt allowing us to have a first, second, and third reading on these bills? Sure, it would extend it to 3 days, but that gives time for citizen input. Our constituents can reach out to us and talk to us, maybe convince us to vote a little differently. It limits their input. It limits our input. We don't have the chance, and thank God, again, this bill came back with sanity on it, but it's not guaranteed. This was signed before all these bills were drafted, so we don't know what was coming to us when this bill was signed. It limits our input. We can't offer amendments. We're limited, extremely limited on debate time. 14 hours on 21 bills. We spent 4.5 hours on one today. And worst off, it limits the transparency. It just does. We dropped these bills the last minute and expected to vote on them. Our constituents, and again, I understand this bill was back to the way it originally or close to, but still, this agreement was drafted before these bills were finished, a lot of them. And my whole goal of standing up and speaking today is putting some sunshine on this. I've been told that this is the way we do it in special session. This is the way we do it at the end of the session. Members, that's wrong. Again, what's the harm in delaying it 3 days and allow us to do first, second, and third reading in the way it was designed to do, to allow for citizen input and legislative input? And I just hope by standing up today and speaking to this that maybe in the future when our leaders get together and they draft this agreement again, that they take this to heart. There's no rush to get this bill done in one day. We have several days before the end of the session, or before we shut the government down. 2 extra days would not blow the place up. So that's my 2 cents, and I appreciate the time. Thank you. And I'm going to support this bill.
I recognize the member from Hennepin, Representative Jones.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I first want to express my appreciation that this bill is coming back to us with no delay in the GHG and VMT law. So really appreciate the people in negotiation who got that out. And secondly, I want to talk about one of my constituents, a woman named Sarah, who I met at my first meet and greet last year. She loves living in our community. She moved into downtown Minneapolis during the pandemic and was excited to get to work at Target. She lives in a car-free household, like 33% of the households in the Loring Park neighborhood. And of course, in the last few years, companies are starting to bring people back to work. And at first, Sarah thought, oh, that's fine. I'll just go walk to the downtown Target office. But unfortunately, her department is housed in the Target campus in Brooklyn Park. which is 15 miles north of her home. And there isn't a viable, reliable, efficient bus to get there, and biking would be a 3-hour round trip, I checked. And so she's now taking an expensive $30 Lyft each way. Luckily, she only has to go in to work a couple of times a month. But she highlighted that even from my transit-rich district, how we need to do transit better, we need to have better connectivity, not just in Minneapolis and St. Paul, but across the whole metro. Building a more connected transit system across the metro was on the table. And I'm thankful that Co-Chair Cagle and Representative Tabke for their leadership on that. But that provision was dropped at the last minute. And that's a real loss for people like Sarah who try to get to work, for the 1 in 5 Minnesota seniors who cannot drive, for the teenagers looking to visit friends and family so their parents don't have to haul them around everywhere, for families buying groceries. I see them on my bus ride home. Most people don't know that funding the transportation bill is mostly constitutionally dedicated. And I suppose that's generally a good thing, because that means roads and bridges aren't put into competition with a number of other really important things for general funds. But that means that when we have a general fund cut target of over $100 million, a lot of that falls squarely onto public transit and active transportation. Like Co-Chair Cagle said, we are saddling these cuts on the backs of people who are least likely to be able to afford it. Guess how much it costs to own and operate a car? Maybe you're thinking a couple $1,000s annually. According to AAA, it's $12,297 on average. When we all have heard that the cost of living is too high, giving Minnesotans additional transportation options would show that we're listening to them. We need to build out our transit system, our bus rapid transit system, for Minnesota's economy, our environment, but also because it's the fiscally responsible thing to do. And we have a few interconnecting issues here in Minnesota. Like I've said before, we have the 4th largest road system out of any state in the country, despite being 12th in size and 23rd in population. Our metro is sprawling into our natural and agricultural areas, and I know so many folks on the other side of the aisle really want to make sure that we're protecting our ag lands. We know that congestion is creating bottlenecks in places all over our system. We've grown by over 2,000 lane miles, or over 14% of our lane miles in the last 20 years in the metro. And actually, as Representative Koznick, or Co-Chair Koznick said, it's estimated that that we have a $1 billion backlog for MnDOT alone on to just maintain our roads. So that doesn't include any county or city roads. I previously sat on my city's Capital Long Range Improvement Committee, so that's the infrastructure committee. And as one of the oldest developed cities in the state with a substantial number of roads, we're now at the point that we're finally reconstructing our whole roads. So I've got probably more of a picture of what it costs to build a road than the average bear. And so actually in my district right now, they're reconstructing Hennepin Avenue after 80 years. They're literally digging up streetcar lines right now. The issue is my city has the density and the commensurate property tax base to at least somewhat keep up with the maintenance and the reconstruction of our roads. To fully reconstruct 1 mile of road in a developed area is $20 million. How can we do that for all of our roads that we are building new today in the metro? The way that our metro is sprawling today, we do not and will not have the money to maintain these roads. This bill also has millions in earmarks, pork on both sides of the aisle, which I'm not a fan of. There's an old saying that when you're in a hole, you should stop digging. This system has become financially unsustainable. What does resolve congestion, though? Reduce the number of lane miles, combat development of our natural lands, our ag lands, and is more financially sustainable? Transit. I want to leave you with a quote from a former mayor of Bogota, Colombia, Enrique Peñalosa. He led the world's revolution on bus rapid transit. And the quote goes, "A developed country is not a place where the poor have cars. It's where the rich use public transportation." A developed country is not a place where the poor have cars, it's where the rich use public transportation. Think about that. Transit is for everyone. It should be for everyone. If you've ever been to Japan, Australia, Europe, even China, the rich take public transit because it's convenient and it avoids gridlock and it's efficient. We could have built that here today, and I am determined that we will. But unfortunately, this bill does not bring us forward. We are unfortunately in a hole, and with this bill, we are continuing to dig, and I will be voting no.
Further discussion? I recognize the member from Dakota, Representative Koznick.
This is a transportation bill. Go ahead and vote for it if you like. Don't vote for it if you don't want to.
I recognize the member from Anoka, Representative Cagle.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, this bill really kind of works on the transformational bill that we passed here in 2023. In 2023, you know, the DFL did the hard work. The DFL made sure that our trunk highways were funded, that the DFL made sure that Metro Transit was solvent. The DFL made sure that we had funding to ensure our roads are safe and our bridges stay up. DFL governs. That's what we do. The GOP held their messaging hearings on, you know, repealing the gas tax and repealing the delivery fee. But then they didn't try very hard after that. So when it comes to governing, we do it, we make the hard decisions, and we make Minnesota work. You know, I'm super disappointed that the House GOP broke their word, but I guess that doesn't surprise me. There are some provisions in this bill that I am proud of. We were able to protect the nation-leading greenhouse gas mitigation program. The transit stuff that we had put in response to the counties was really a way to try and help them advance their greenhouse gas mitigation. But without this BRT funding in there, the counties are now 100% on the hook for all of their greenhouse gas mitigation. And so that's a big disappointment, because this would have been a really great place where the counties could have turned to have those offsets. We were also able to protect the Blue Line extension, the NLX line to Duluth, as well as look at trying to get some more corridors funded. And so I'm really kind of conflicted on this bill. It makes me really sad that we can't trust the words of our colleagues, and that cuts suck. $115 million worth of cuts are being borne on the backs of transit riders. When we had to make those cuts to roads, what did we do? We backfilled it because we didn't want to hurt roads and bridges. And we wanted to do that same thing with transit. We wanted to backfill it and make sure that the cuts that we were making were even to roads and bridges. So I'm sorry that we weren't able to do that. But I am proud of the fact that we were able to stop the GOP from repealing the greenhouse gas emissions nation-leading bill, and that we were able to protect all of the giant wins that we made in 2023 to ensure that Minnesota, when we're in a state of deficit right now in our general fund, our transportation budgets are healthy. Our trunk highway funds are healthy. We made transit and Metro Transit solvent in 2023, and so we know that we have the capital and operating that we can move forward with transit in this area. I just wish we had the will to build it out. So again, yeah, I guess I agree with Rep. Koznick, vote your conscience. And yeah, I still don't know how I'm voting, so thank you.
There being no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will call the name of the member participating remotely.
Olson.
House File 14, Olson votes no.
Olson votes no.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 78 ayes and 55 nays, the bill is passed and its title is agreed to.